Welcome back, everybody. My name is Grizz, and we are jumping into Microsoft Flight Simulator today. So the new Microsoft Flight Simulator actually comes out. It released the other day, the date of, I believe it's November 19th. I don't want to quote myself on that. I'd have to look that up. But anyway, I'm new to Microsoft Flight Simulator. I had downloaded it a few years ago and never really got into it. And over the last few weeks, I've been trying to kind of teach myself the ropes, especially flying the airliners that are in the sim. So what we're going to do today is, I know I had to go out and look up some videos on how to fire up these aircraft, and so I wanted to just make a quick tutorial video for you guys. If you're new to the game, you're a little nervous about trying to get started, don't feel bad. I was in the same spot, and so I want to make a video to maybe help somebody else out that's sitting there thinking about picking up the sim but doesn't really know where to start. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to try to make some more videos for Flight Simulator, as I've really grown fond of the game and the simulation and all the stuff that you can do to immerse yourself into the game. So alright, let's tag along, let's get loaded up, and we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so one of the big things I really struggled with is I wanted to start from parked at the gate and be able to fire the aircraft up from what they call cold and dark. Okay, so I really struggled on, like, man, how do I get to that position? Because every time I would load the game up, it would just spawn me in on the active runway with the engines and everything started, basically just ready for me to take off the parking brake and press forward on the throttles, right? So real quick, so here's all you have to do, okay, if you want to set up the cold and dark state. You go to world map, and we'll keep it simple for today. I'll make some other videos on some other ways to, get your flight plans and be a little more immersive in that aspect, but we'll start simple today. So all you have to do, go up here and select your departure. So we'll go out of Atlanta just because it was the first one up there. Okay, so you can obviously search in there if you don't know the code for the airport. Okay, and do it that way as well, or just search for the name and it should pop up. So now what you want to do is, you can see here, you don't want to spawn on the runway. Okay, if you do that, it's not going to be in a cold and dark state. So what you can do is a little drop down box, come down here and find a gate. Okay, so it doesn't really matter, unless you're getting a little more, immersive into the sim of where you're supposed to be and not supposed to be, right? So just for sake of today, right, so we'll choose gate 74. As you can see here, it highlights now where we're starting from, okay, and that's it. So I'm not going to select an arrival or anything. I usually use a program called SimBrief, and it's free. It's very easy to use, and I can link that down below in the video for you guys. But this is how we're going to set up getting into the airport and have the aircraft in a cold and dark state. Alrighty, so here we are at Atlanta International Airport. As you guys can see, so this is a Delta Airbus A320, okay? I wanted to make this video specifically about the Airbus because, to me, who, just for clarification and to put an asterisk on things, okay, I am not a real world pilot. Don't have any aviation experience. This is me just liking aviation, thinking it's extremely cool and interesting, and wanting to teach myself, how to do some of this stuff. So no real world applications, but just for the game, I wanted to talk you guys through how to get one of these Airbuses, specifically the A320, fired up, okay? I think it's the easiest plane in the game as far as, like, for new people to the sim. It's very, very user-friendly, okay? Now, the cool thing, if you guys are wondering about how to get, like, the Delta livery, as they call it on there, okay? This Airbus A320 is actually a product of a developer company called FlyByWire, okay? And what's cool about it is there's some out there you can pay for, but this one's absolutely free, okay? All you have to go do is download their installer from the internet, from Google. Just Google FlyByWire installer, and you can download it right to your computer, okay? And then you can go to another website to get deliveries, and I can link all that stuff down below, okay? So, like I said, completely free, which is awesome. All right, I think it's good for people starting to get into the game, so they're not spending a lot of money and not really knowing what they're doing, right, and not have fun or whatever. So, a little bit loud. I apologize for the air traffic, okay? I didn't mess with turning all that off, but first thing you would normally do, okay, if this is a real world application, would be a walk around to the aircraft, right? You'd want to look at things, make sure the brakes and the wheels and everything like that. And like I said, this is just from my understanding, because I'm not a real world pilot, okay? So let's pretend for the sake of this video that we've checked everything on the outside, all the exterior stuff looks good, and let's get into the cockpit, okay? Alrighty, so inside the flight deck here of the FlyByWire A320. So really cool, as you guys can see, everything is turned off. The systems are cold and dark, as they say, okay? So the first thing that I normally like to do, okay, is you want to start getting some power to the aircraft, right? So there's checklists that you can go through that are downloadable. It's really cool to help out, just give some further immersion into the sim, all right? But I'm gonna give you guys just the short and skinny of getting this aircraft fired up, okay? So as you guys can see over here, we have an EFB, as they call it, okay? It's an electronic flight bag. So you have your iPad over here, you can actually click on it and that will fire up, okay? This comes into more importance when we talk about downloading our flight plans from SimBrief, like I talked about earlier, okay? And getting your weights and your payload and your fuel and stuff like that you'll have to enter in, okay? So more for another video, but I just thought, like I said, they did a really good job on this, and it's absolutely free, right? So going back here, all right, step number one that you want to get into is we'll go to, you make sure that the parking brake's set, you don't have any throttles or nothing's going on here, okay? Everything's cold and dark, right? So let's get into the very first steps of how to get this fired up. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, we need to go to the overhead panel, okay? So on the keyboard, for me, I don't have it key bound to anything specific right now, so I believe the default is Control and then 8. So that brings us to the overhead panel. And I know what you're thinking if you're new to this, just like I was, is like, holy crap, that's a lot of buttons and switches, right? Not too bad once you get used to it, okay? Like I said, the Airbus, specifically the A320, very straightforward, user-friendly for somebody that's new to this and doesn't have real-world piloting experience on a commercial aircraft, right? So first thing you want to do, overhead panel, all right? We need to get the batteries going to the aircraft, okay? So if you'll see here, right in the middle of the screen, these are your two batteries, your BAT 1 and your BAT 2, all right? We're going to go ahead and turn those on. All right, as you'll hear, you start to see some lights disappear and you hear some beeping, okay? Things are starting to happen in the aircraft, all right? So once those are on, the next we need to get electrical power to the aircraft, okay? Now, there's a couple ways we can do that. One, if you have what they call the ground power unit available. So if we go back to the outside of the aircraft, it's really fast. And this truck here, this truck can hook up to the aircraft, providing it external power because it's external of the aircraft. It's on the outside, right? So that's one way. If that's available, use that. Okay, so we'll say we have the ground power hooked up. The external power right here is a little green light that says available, right? So what we will do is show you guys here, external power, right? So if we click that on, you'll hear the click and you hear things start to fire up even more, okay? A couple more lights came on, these white lights here, as you can see, some things start happening in the aircraft, right? Now, if you don't have external power or it's not hooked up, then you would want to start the APU, okay? The auxiliary power unit, all right? Another big important part of the aircraft. So we have this on, okay? Now let's talk about starting the APU. So the APU is very simple on this aircraft to turn on, okay? As you see down here, all right, the little section specifically labeled APU, okay? So what the APU is, to my knowledge, is another generator in the aircraft, okay? And if we go back to the outside one more time, if you can just bear with me on the noise level, okay? The other aircrafts. Here on the tail of the aircraft, you see this little opening right here. This is the APU, okay? It's in the back of the aircraft, provides auxiliary power to the aircraft if it needs to, right? So what we'll do, the APU master switch will come on there. You want to wait a few seconds, okay? Most things I've read is about 3 to 4 seconds in between turning that on, okay? And then you want to hit the APU start button. So that'll come on, labeled on in blue, right? Now what you want to do is after a few minutes and the APU gets fired up, the green available sign will come up, okay? And so when that happens, When that happens, the APU is available now to be turned on, right? So then we'll go to the next step after that. Alright, as you can see here now, the APU is available, okay? So the next step is you want to turn on the APU bleed, which is this button here in the middle, okay? So that allows the aircraft to be connected to its electrical power systems, right? So you press this, it's also going to provide the necessary air to be able to fire up the engines here in a little bit, okay? So you want to turn on the APU bleed. As you can see, that's on. And you'll hear the noises in the background of when these things are, these systems are starting to happen, right? It's a very, very well modeled aircraft, okay? Like I said, for it being free, Fly-by-Wire did a great job, okay? Very immersive. So now that you have the APU running and the APU bleed on, you could turn off the external power, okay? Normally what I do is I just leave that connected until we go to do our pushback from the gate, right? So I do that before I push back from the gate, and then before I taxi, you go through some other steps to turn the APU off, okay? We'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's move to just starting up the engines, okay? Now, as you can see on some of these other views here, just really quick, not to get too sidetracked on ourselves, okay? The MCDU down here, this menu, okay? This is, the computer's, or the aircraft's brain, right? It's the computer of the aircraft. This is where you would go to enter flight plans, weights, all that stuff. We'll make a separate video on that, okay? We'll just talk today specifically about getting the aircraft powered up and get the engine started, okay? So keep that in mind. Once all these systems are fired up, as you can see here, these ECAM screens in the middle will tell you, let's just brighten these up just a little bit so you guys can see. It'll tell you that the parking brake's set, all right, the APU bleeds on, and your TCAS, which is just some other information about the aircraft, okay? You can see all this here. So very important screens, but we'll get to that at a different time. So if we go back up top to the overhead panel, they say you want to eliminate any white lights, okay? You want to go through your flows, as they call it here, right? So you would flow down each of these panels and make sure that there's no whites showing, as you can see, okay? So we have the crew supply for oxygen, okay? It's turned off. We want to make sure that's on in case we need oxygen in the flight deck for the captain and the first officer, right? So next thing we're going to do, you need to make sure that your fuel pumps are turned on. This is all your fuel pump stuff here, right? So we'll make sure those come on. No whites there, okay? We look down through here. These that say fault, that's okay for right now. Don't worry about that, all right? A lot of that stuff changes when you get the aircraft powered up. Okay, so now we've moved down to the throttle pedestal, okay? The throttle quadrant here. Make sure, I don't know why those came out like that, sorry. Okay, so the big thing here, all right, we'll go to fire up the engines, right? These, let's make sure those are turned off, sorry. So you can do this with your mouse, obviously. I have a Thrustmaster Airbus throttle quadrant, okay? So I have the ability to use the switches and the knobs here, but you can do it with your mouse, and I'm going to show you guys that. So that stuff makes the immersion a little better, but if you're first getting into this, you don't want to spend a bunch of money, I completely understand, and that's how I was, okay? So what you want to do here is you have your ignition switch, right? So you want to make sure that that switch goes over to ignition start, all right? And you'll see this brings up your engine page here, right? Okay. Now, with the Airbus, it's pretty simple after this, right? So you got your APU bleed on, the APU's on, all right? You got your fuel pumps turned on. Now, ignition on, and we start with engine 2, and we flip the switch, all right? Now, as you can see here, things start to happen, right? Your N2 percentage starts to rise. Your EGT pressure starts to rise, and your N1 percentage starts to rise, okay? This means that the engine is successfully starting up. You hear the hum of the engine starting, and if we go to the outside, You guys can see here that the engine's starting to spool up. Now, what you want to make sure while these levels start to rise, okay, is you want to give the aircraft's engine one at a time. You want to give it time to stabilize one at a time, okay? So, as you can see here, it now says available. The N1 is at a steady percentage here, okay? So that engine is stable. It started up, there's no issues, right? You don't want to start both engines at the same time because maybe you run into something that's faulty on one or something happens, right? So you want to make sure this is stabilized. It is. All of our numbers look good, okay? Very simple. You go down and you repeat the process, right? So engine 1 comes on. And these are giving me warnings because we don't have the system set up in here. You have to take off, right? So no worries, just worried about getting the engine fired up. And I can go through a full breakdown of all this in a different video. It's a little more complicated, but it's not too bad once you get used to it. So same thing, percentages are starting to rise. You can see the engines are coming to life. And if we go back out, our engine number 1 is now spooling up and turning. Okay, so as we can see here, I can actually zoom in on this for you guys. Let's do this. We can bring this up on the screen. As you guys can see, okay, the engines are stable, they're running, all right. No warning lights or anything have come on. You now have power to the aircraft via the engines, right? So what that means, if you want to go back to the overhead panel, like we discussed earlier, your external power can come off, okay? The aircraft is now being powered by its own engines, right? Your APU bleed, once the engines are stable and fired up, the APU bleed can come off, as well as the APU master switch can come off, okay? This stays lit as available, okay? You'd have to go back through and turn it on and restart it again, right? But right now it's no longer necessary because the engines are fired up, the aircraft's running under its own power, right? So as you can see here, going through your flows again, go down through here, no white lights showing. These generators that were showing fault earlier, now that the aircraft's fired up, those have turned off, okay? No whites, anything. And you're good to go, right? So as far as firing up the aircraft, the A320, the fly-by-wire model, it's that simple to fire up the aircraft, okay? Like I said, there's some steps and procedures to go through before you're fully ready to push back from the gate and take off, okay? We can do that in another video, walk you guys through it, but that is straightforward and simple as it can be to fire up this aircraft. Last thing you need to do once everything's good and fired up, go back down here to your ignition switch, make sure that goes back to normal in the center position there, as you can see, so it goes from to the right back to the middle. And that's as straightforward and simple as it gets, okay? So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Like I said, if you're new to Microsoft Flight Simulator and you want to get into it, you want to fly commercial aircrafts, and you don't really know where to start, I hope this helped. This is just information that I've gathered from watching other people fire up these aircrafts, okay? Once again, I am no airline pilot, not by any means, okay? So this is not for real world application, but as far as the simulator goes, this will get your engines fired up and going, okay? So that's the procedure, that's simple. If you guys like the video, if you guys want to watch more videos on how to do things inside the commercial aircrafts in Microsoft Flight Simulator, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment on something you may want to see or you're struggling with, and maybe I can try to help you understand it a little better, the best that I can, okay, with the knowledge that I've tried to teach myself over the last few weeks, okay? So that's everything. As you guys can see, our Airbus A320 is fired up with some planes taking off in the background. And that'll do it for this video, guys. I hope you like it. Like I said, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.